Hollywood's golden age promised beauty, charm, and grace, but behind the velvet curtains, many beloved actresses hid revolting personal habits that would have shattered their glamorous image. From foul odors to filthy homes, here are 12 legendary women whose public perfection was a carefully crafted illusion, and whose private realities might make your stomach turn. 1. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was the embodiment of old Hollywood elegance, statuesque, immaculately dressed, and always ready for the camera. Studio PR portrayed her as a perfectionist with impeccable hygiene, a woman who lived for cleanliness. But that narrative masked a darker truth. Joan's obsession with cleanliness was often a performance, hiding unpleasant personal habits and an off-putting demeanor behind the scenes. On set, co-stars reported that Crawford wore an overpowering, cloying perfume so strong it made enclosed spaces unbearable. Some whispered this was to mask persistent body odor, while others believed it was part of her carefully engineered signature, a sensory branding that unfortunately overwhelmed the people forced to work closely with her. Off-camera, Crawford was infamous for her ruthless treatment of those she deemed beneath her. She belittled stagehands, bullied junior actors, and would allegedly throw tantrums if she wasn't the most glamorous person in the room. Even during costume fittings, she was known to sweat heavily under the hot lights, staining the expensive garments, and then refusing to let them be laundered until after multiple wears. Her home life was no less unsettling. According to those who knew her personally, Crawford was a master of illusion. Her houses gleamed for photographers, but were far less pristine day to day. Staff claimed she often let clutter and food scraps linger in rooms that weren't camera-ready. Crawford's star power was undeniable, and audiences bought into her brand of untouchable sophistication. But for those who had to endure her behind closed doors, the experience was far from glamorous. She wasn't just acting in films, she was acting her entire life, convincing the public they were seeing perfection when in truth they were smelling something else entirely. 2. Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead was a force of nature, loud, brash, and irresistibly magnetic. She lit up the stage and screen with her sultry voice and unapologetic wit, earning a loyal following and a reputation as one of the most daring women in Hollywood. Yet her personal hygiene, or lack thereof, was the stuff of legend. Tallulah was notorious for skipping baths, sometimes going weeks without washing. She openly bragged about her natural approach to cleanliness, claiming soap and water were overrated. The result was a lingering, musky odor that clung to her clothes and trailed her through every room she entered. Co-stars and crew members often joked that you could hear Tallulah coming by her booming laugh and smell her before she arrived. Her smoking habit made matters worse. Bankhead was rarely seen without a cigarette, often chain-smoking through entire film shoots. The combination of stale tobacco, unwashed hair, and sweat created a pungent cloud that seemed to follow her everywhere. Still, she leaned into her eccentricity, wearing her bad habits like badges of rebellion. In social circles, Tallulah was outrageously uninhibited. She'd greet guests in wrinkled, soiled gowns from the night before, hair unbrushed and makeup half-smudged. Some found it charming in a wild child sort of way, others simply found it revolting. And yet Hollywood couldn't quit her. Her charisma was so intoxicating that audiences forgave, or never knew, the reality. For Tallulah, the trick wasn't convincing people she was flawless. It was making them believe her flaws were part of her allure. 3. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich's icy elegance and smoky glamour defined an era. She was a fashion icon, a muse for designers, and a screen siren whose allure seemed untouchable. But Dietrich's mystique didn't extend to her personal habits, which left some colleagues recoiling. Dietrich had a notorious aversion to laundering certain garments, particularly her undergarments, preferring to rewear them multiple times before washing. In the heat of the studio lights, this led to lingering odors that were impossible to ignore during intimate scenes. Crew members quietly traded complaints, but few dared confront her directly. Dietrich's status was too high. her temper too unpredictable. She also had a habit of leaving half-eaten food in her dressing room for days, allowing a sour smell to develop. Combined with heavy perfume, the effect was unsettling, an uneasy mix of decay and floral sweetness. Despite this, Dietrich's public image remained pristine. She cultivated an air of perfection through her lighting, wardrobe, and carefully rehearsed mannerisms. Fans saw only the shimmering gowns and the poised smile, never suspecting the less-than-fresh reality lurking beneath. In the end, Dietrich's trick was simple. Keep the lights dim, the camera rolling, and the truth hidden. Audiences fell in love with the illusion, an illusion they might have thought twice about had they been standing in her scene partner's shoes. 4. Clara Bow. Clara Bow, the original It Girl, was the face of 1920s Hollywood glamour. With her wide eyes, vibrant personality, and magnetic screen presence, she captivated audiences and became the symbol of flapper-era fun. But away from the cameras, Bow's lifestyle and habits were shockingly far from the glitz she projected. Known for her wild parties and an open-door policy for friends, animals, and strangers alike, Clara's home quickly earned a reputation for chaos. Visitors described rooms littered with dirty laundry, empty bottles, and, most unpleasantly, dog messes left uncleaned. Bow adored her pets, but she allowed them to relieve themselves indoors, creating a lingering smell that clung to the air and her clothing. Her hygiene wasn't much better. Clara was known to skip regular bathing and often appeared on set with unwashed hair, claiming she didn't have time for vanity when she was busy living life. That may have worked for her rebellious public image, but for her co-stars, it meant enduring a sour, sweaty scent during close-up scenes. The press, of course, never mentioned any of this. Studios protected their investment, painting her as the playful, untamed spirit of Hollywood's youth. But those who visited her home or worked beside her told a different story. One of a woman whose charm was genuine, but whose cleanliness left much to be desired. Bow's career eventually faltered under the strain of scandals and personal struggles, but the myth of her glamour endured. It was proof that in Hollywood, charisma could make even the most unpleasant truths vanish under the bright lights. 5. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow, the blonde bombshell of the 1930s, was one of MGM's brightest stars. Her shimmering platinum hair and flirty smile made her a fantasy figure for millions. But behind the image was a routine that was as unpleasant as it was dangerous. Harlow's iconic hair was maintained through an extreme bleaching process, a mix of ammonia, household bleach, and peroxide that left her hair brittle and her scalp perpetually irritated. The harsh chemicals created a strong, acrid odor that clung to her hair and lingered in any room she entered. Her beauty regimen was so toxic that stylists had to wear gloves when working with her hair, and co-stars quietly complained about the sharp chemical smell during romantic scenes. Yet Harlow refused to change, convinced that her icy blonde image was key to her success. Harlow's hygiene habits off-set weren't exactly meticulous either. Friends recalled that during busy filming periods, she would wear the same costumes multiple days in a row without laundering them, allowing sweat and studio dust to build up. The result was an unpleasant mix of chemical hair treatments and stale fabric odors that could ruin the illusion of her perfect screen goddess persona, if anyone dared speak about it. Still, her radiant smile and magnetic personality made it easy for audiences to overlook the reality. Harlow's secret was that she knew how to make the camera fall in love with her, even if the person standing opposite her might have been holding their breath. 6. Bette Davis. Bette Davis was a powerhouse, fierce, uncompromising, and fiercely talented. She commanded the screen with her piercing eyes and unshakable presence, redefining what it meant to be a leading lady. But her off-camera behavior was often just as memorable, for all the wrong reasons. Davis was a notorious chain smoker, lighting one cigarette after another throughout the day. On set, the smell of stale tobacco clung to her hair, clothing, and even the scripts she handled. Crew members complained that the smoke lingered in enclosed spaces long after she left. Her temper was legendary, and so was her disregard for polite etiquette. Stories circulated of Davis spitting on stagehands she disliked or tossing coffee at assistants who failed to meet her expectations. Her dressing rooms often reeked of smoke, coffee, and the faint sourness of clothing that hadn't been laundered between shoots. Despite this, Davis's talent was undeniable. She could deliver a performance so riveting that audiences forgot or never knew about the less than glamorous habits that followed her. For her, the trick wasn't hiding her flaws, but making them seem like part of her uncompromising artistry. 7. Mae West. Mae West was the queen of double entendres, a woman who could command a stage or a screen with a single raised eyebrow. Her wit was legendary, her charisma magnetic, and her influence on Hollywood undeniable. But while audiences saw a sparkling star dripping in diamonds and glamour, those who got close often encountered something far less appealing. West was meticulous about her costumes and public image, but her living quarters and personal habits told another story. She was known to keep her private dressing rooms cluttered with aging food, stacks of untouched fan mail, and unwashed garments she intended to wear again. Crew members claimed the air often carried a musty, stale smell, a blend of old fabric, cosmetics, and leftover meals. On set, West preferred to remain in costume between takes, no matter how hot the lights grew. This meant sweat-soaked gowns were often left to dry naturally, only to be reworn the next day without cleaning. The heavy perfumes she favored masked some of it, but the combination of floral scent and stale fabric was unmistakable to anyone working nearby. Still, her confidence was so overpowering that it seemed to override reality. She strutted through life with the same swagger she brought to her characters, making audiences believe she was the epitome of sophistication. What they didn't realize was that part of her signature aroma came from a room that hadn't been aired out in weeks. Mae West proved that in Hollywood, attitude could be the strongest perfume of all, even if the real scent told another story entirely. 8. Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner was the very definition of sultry beauty, a woman whose striking features and smoky voice made her one of MGM's most bankable stars. She radiated glamour in every photograph, yet her hygiene habits were a poorly kept secret within the industry. Gardner was famously dismissive of deodorant. She reportedly preferred her natural scent, claiming it was part of her allure. While some admirers may have found that romantic, those working in close quarters described it less flatteringly, especially during long shooting days under hot studio lights. Her aversion to deodorant wasn't her only quirk. Gardner often skipped daily bathing when traveling, citing fatigue or tight schedules. During film shoots, she was known to keep costumes for multiple wears without a proper wash, relying on light spritzes of perfume to keep up appearances. The effect, however, was more of a blend between musk and roses than the crisp glamour audiences imagined. In social settings, Ava's magnetic charm made it difficult for people to criticize her openly. She could be bawdy and fun, holding court at late-night gatherings and keeping everyone entertained. But behind closed doors, makeup artists and wardrobe assistants often exchanged knowing glances about the less-than-fresh conditions they had to work with. Her screen image never faltered, because Hollywood understood the truth. If the camera loves you, it will forgive almost anything. 9. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo was the ultimate enigma. Known for her haunting beauty and aloof demeanor, she became a cinematic icon by doing the one thing few stars dared: cultivating mystery. She famously shunned publicity and avoided the spotlight outside of her films. But part of that reclusiveness, according to friends and acquaintances, came down to habits that would have clashed with her image. Garbo was known for keeping her living spaces closed off, with curtains drawn and windows rarely opened. Visitors described her apartments as dim, airless, and tinged with a stale, musty odor. She disliked visitors lingering too long, perhaps aware that the less time people spent inside, the less they might notice. Her personal hygiene also raised eyebrows. While not filthy, Garbo reportedly bathed infrequently, especially during periods when she was not working. She had a habit of wearing the same comfortable clothing for days on end, with little regard for how they smelled or looked. On set, Garbo's intense focus and professionalism made her a joy for directors, but co-stars occasionally whispered about the air of unwashed fabric and enclosed rooms that seemed to follow her. Yet the camera adored her, and her serene, sculpted face gave nothing away. In the end, Garbo's greatest trick was convincing the world that her distance was part of her mystique, when in reality it might have been as much about keeping certain realities hidden from view. 10. Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh's beauty was so luminous on screen that audiences could hardly imagine her as anything but flawless. Her portrayal of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind became immortal, and her delicate features and refined accent cemented her as a vision of grace. Yet behind the camera, Leigh's personal reality was far less polished. Leigh struggled with bipolar disorder, a condition that could swing her from high-energy charm to deep, unkempt withdrawal. During manic phases, she was dazzling, witty, and magnetic. But during depressive spells, her self-care often vanished entirely. Friends and co-stars recalled visits where she remained in the same nightgown for days, her hair unbrushed, her surroundings in disarray. Even during work, her hygiene could suffer. Prolonged filming days often meant she skipped bathing, relying instead on perfumes and powders to maintain appearances. Under the bright, hot lights, these cosmetic layers mixed with sweat, creating an odor that was hard to ignore in close scenes. Costumers sometimes found garments rumpled and faintly sour from repeated wears without laundering. Those close to her rarely spoke of it publicly, out of respect for her struggles and immense talent. The studios, ever protective of their stars, ensured her image remained untarnished in the press. But for those who shared confined dressing rooms or intimate scenes, the contrast between the screen goddess and the private woman was jarring. Vivien Leigh's tragedy was that her illness robbed her of the energy to maintain the image Hollywood demanded. Her beauty was real, but so were the human flaws the public was never meant to see. 11. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was the embodiment of mid-century glamour, the ultimate blonde bombshell, the dream girl of millions. Yet behind the carefully lit photographs and the flawless makeup lay habits that would have shattered the illusion for many fans. Those who lived with Marilyn or worked closely on set often spoke of her chronic tardiness and casual disregard for daily hygiene during her darker moods. When depressed, she sometimes avoided bathing for days, wore the same clothes repeatedly, and let her bedclothes go unchanged for long stretches. Her love of lounging, often for hours, in her iconic silk robes became a problem when the garments weren't regularly cleaned. Combined with her tendency to eat in bed and leave dishes nearby, the air in her personal quarters could be unexpectedly stale. On set, costumers occasionally noted the faint scent of unwashed fabric beneath the perfumes she favored. Despite this, Monroe's charm was magnetic. She had the rare gift of making every person in the room feel as though they were the most important to her. Her beauty and vulnerability kept the public entranced, even if those closest to her occasionally endured an entirely different reality. The magic of Marilyn was that she could step in front of a camera and instantly erase every trace of fatigue, neglect, or sadness. To the world, she was always glowing, even when the glow was more illusion than truth. 12th. Lupe Velez. Lupe Velez was a firecracker, the Mexican Spitfire whose energy and charisma leapt off the screen. She was bold, funny, and utterly unforgettable, but her personal habits could be as explosive as her temper. Velez had a reputation for passionate, volatile behavior, and that volatility extended to her home life. Friends described her house as a whirlwind of clutter, unwashed dishes, and lingering food smells. While she loved hosting impromptu gatherings, guests often found themselves surrounded by the remains of previous parties, glasses still sticky with liquor, ashtrays overflowing, and half-eaten plates left on tables. Her hygiene could be equally inconsistent. Lupe often rushed from one engagement to another without pausing for a change of clothes or a bath, relying on heavy perfumes to maintain her glamorous image. Under the California sun, however, that combination could quickly sour, especially during long days on outdoor sets. What saved Lupe's image was her sheer force of personality. She was so entertaining, so alive, that people forgave or overlooked the less appealing realities. Her laugh, her unpredictability, and her willingness to say anything kept her at the center of attention. Velez's public persona was pure Hollywood sparkle, but like so many stars of her era, it was carefully staged. Behind the charm and the headlines was a woman whose private habits clashed sharply with the perfection the cameras captured. Hollywood's golden age wasn't just built on beauty, it thrived on illusion. These 12 actresses proved that charm and charisma could hide almost anything. Now you know the truth behind the glamour, but will it change how you see them? Subscribe for more hidden stories from cinema's glittering past.